Eating 0 point moods. Oops. Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Nikki, and today's video will be a compilation of some 0 point recipes. So recently I've enjoyed doing a full day of eating only 0 point foods as a fun challenge to just come up with different recipes that really prioritize all the different 0 point foods on WeightWatchers, and I'll pop mine on the screen. It is different for some people, so keep that in mind with this video. If you're set to the diabetic mode in the WeightWatchers app, potatoes won't be 0, fruit won't be 0. So this 0 point recipe video is using the more basic foods for just like the core plan in mind, but if you're on a different program, it may change. So just keep that in mind with this video. I really enjoy doing it because it helps me to prioritize a lot of proteins and fibers, and I just have fun coming up with the recipes, not using any points. So today I thought it would be helpful to just have them all together as one big recipe video. I will be doing a voiceover for each one, walking through the steps of how I made it, and everything is gonna be 0 points. If you enjoyed this video or find it helpful, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I don't recommend that you need to be eating 0 point meals for any specific reason, but there are some days where maybe I know I'm going to be eating out for dinner and using up some extra points. So if I can make a breakfast that's still really filling and full of protein and fiber, but it doesn't use any points, then I do try to do that, or just keep things nice and low point, but still making sure to fuel and nourish my body. And that's what these recipes can be really helpful with. Or at the end of the day, if you run out of points and you want a sweet treat, I've got some desserts in this video that are 0 points and some of my favorites to have. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and find it helpful, and let's go ahead and get started with the first recipe. First up, I am making some shrimp and ground chicken tacos using romaine lettuce as the taco shells. So in a pan on the stove, I've got some ground chicken that I just start cooking up. I'm chopping up some veggies here, so I've got red bell pepper and some carrots, as well as some green onion. And I'll just use the green onion as a garnish on top, but in a pan I'm also cooking up the carrots and bell pepper that I just sprayed some nonstick spray into the pan first. While the veggies and chicken are cooking, I make the sauce that I'm going to drizzle on top using some plain non-fat Greek yogurt, a little soy sauce, some sriracha, and then I also added in a little garlic salt. I mix that all together, just adjusting it to taste, and then I put that aside and continue cooking the veggies and chicken. To the pepper and carrots, I add a splash of soy sauce and some onion powder, and then to the ground chicken, I've got some garlic butter seasoning as well as this honey garlic seasoning. And I did use my meat masher to break it down into smaller pieces. I took some out that I'll be saving for later, but this is the portion I'll be having today. Then I push the chicken to the side and add in the shrimp that I'll be adding to my wraps today. And usually I like to get raw shrimp. All I had in the freezer was pre-cooked, so it only took a few minutes to heat up. And I also added a little bit of that honey garlic to the shrimp while it was cooking. I picked 3 big pieces of romaine that would work as the shells, and then I started portioning out some of the cooked veggies, the ground chicken, and the shrimp. On top of that, I added the chopped up green onion, and then I put a drizzle of that Greek yogurt sauce I made. I always get questions about how I drizzle the sauce, and I've got some extra cookie icing bags from my cookie decorating business, so I just use those with the sauce. I pour them in there and use that to drizzle them on. This berry oatmeal bake has become one of my favorite sweet 0 point options. I start by mashing a banana and adding some unsweetened applesauce and egg. I also mixed in a tablespoon of plain non-fat Greek yogurt. I add some vanilla and cinnamon, and I just mix that until it's combined. I mixed in a half cup of oats, and today I'm using old-fashioned, but you can use whatever you have on hand. It does change the consistency just a little bit, but then I add in 1 cup of frozen mixed berries. I've got my glass baking dish that is 8 by 6 by 2, and I spray it with some nonstick spray, pour all the oats and berries in, and then I bake it at 350 for about 25 to 30 minutes. I love this hard-boiled egg maker. It really does make the eggs perfect every single time. You just have to poke a hole in them and then pour the water into the bottom. Although I do have to say the noise that it makes when the eggs are done is so loud, and it still to this day scares me every single time I make them. But while the eggs are cooking, I get the chicken sausage patties ready to go. So I added some sage and thyme and salt and pepper and garlic. I always just prefer to put gloves on when I'm making burgers or chicken patties or things like this. So I just use my hands to mix all the ingredients together and weigh them out into equal portions. So once I've used my food scale to weigh them out into equal servings, I form them into the shape of patties and add them to the pan that I have heating up on the stove. And I just sprayed it with some nonstick olive oil spray. And even though these are technically 0 points, I do like to just weigh them out so that they're equal sizes, and it makes it just easier to track the ingredients. So what I do is I weigh out the entire portion of ground chicken, and then I take that number and divide it by however many chicken sausage patties I want, and then that's the number that each one comes out to. Usually I weigh them out in grams, but you could also do ounces. I let those cook in the pan for a few minutes, and then once they start to brown a little bit, I just flip them over. And it worked out perfectly that right as those were finishing up, the hard-boiled eggs were also done, so I just put them in a bowl of cold water in the sink. For my yogurt fruit dip, I have the birthday cake extract that I just mix in to the fat-free yogurt, and I really like the Chobani brand for this, and for a lot of different recipes actually. It's really the brand that I get the most. And the fruit that I had on hand for my snack plate today was some red and green grapes, and then some pineapple that I had gotten from Sam's Club. It was so juicy, so it went really, really well with the fruit dip. I decided to have 3 of the chicken sausage patties and then 3 hard-boiled eggs. I just cut each one in half and then topped it with some everything seasoning. And specifically, I used the Asiago everything seasoning that I had gotten from Aldi. We also have a jalapeno flavored one that is really good. I added a little bit of salt and pepper as well. And honestly, I meant to add some hot sauce to the eggs, but it didn't even need it. I was taking bites of the sausage patty with the egg together, and it was such a good combination. And then, of course, I ended with the fruit and dip. This next dish took no time to throw together, and it was super filling and flavorful for how easy it was. I started by cooking a pound of lean ground chicken, and I just flip it as it starts to brown and then use my meat masher to break it into smaller pieces. I seasoned the meat with a little garlic butter seasoning, some oregano and Italian seasoning, and then I added a can of drained diced tomatoes. I let that cook for a few minutes, and then hearts of palm isn't always the easiest thing to find, but I can usually get it at Trader Joe's and Aldi. If I had to explain how it tastes, I would say a mix between asparagus and artichoke hearts, but it's shaped like pasta and works perfectly for dishes like this. So I just mixed it in to get it tossed with the chicken. I did add 1 teaspoon of grated Parmesan, which was 0 points. Next up, I'm making a chicken and white bean soup that is nice and flavorful, but also really filling. For the potatoes I'm using today, I've got the bag of Simply potatoes, and I pour about 2/3 cup into the pot that I sprayed with some nonstick spray. I let the potatoes cook for a few minutes, and then I add in the diced bell pepper that I have, as well as some diced carrot. Next, I add some garlic, salt, onion powder, and Italian chicken seasoning, and I just stir that till it's nice and combined. Then I've got 1 cup of white beans that I just strained, and I pour those into the pot. Chicken broth is 0 points on WeightWatchers, so I add 1.5 cups of that and a little bit of water. Then I did have some blackened chicken that was cooking in the air fryer, so using my kitchen scissors, I just cut that into smaller pieces to add it to the soup. You could definitely add more white beans in place of the chicken if you didn't want to add meat to this, but I find that for me, I just prefer the flavor, and it makes it nice and filling and high in protein. I let it cook for about 10 to 15 minutes all combined, and then I pour it into my nice big soup bowl and enjoy. Next up is another variation of the oat bake that I made. I start by mashing up a banana. Then I add in a container of no sugar added applesauce to add some sweetness. I've got 2 tablespoons of plain non-fat Greek yogurt, 1 egg. I also mixed in some cinnamon, a half teaspoon of baking powder, a little bit of sugar-free caramel syrup, and then I had a Flavor God chocolate donut topper, so I mixed a little bit of that in as well. Then I added a half cup of oats, and today I used instant oats, which I find makes it a little bit fluffier and more cake-like than the old-fashioned oats. So once that's all combined, I pour it into my glass baking dish and pop it in the oven at 350 for 25 to 30 minutes. And while that was baking, I made a quick yogurt drizzle, so I just used some plain non-fat Greek yogurt, sugar-free caramel syrup, and a little bit of cinnamon, and I whisked that together, put it in an icing bag, and drizzled it on top. For these apple fries, it's like the potatoes. You could definitely peel them if you prefer, but I usually just like to leave the skin on. I just chop up the apple, which I have a Honeycrisp apple here, into fry shapes, and then in my air fryer basket, I put a foil with some nonstick butter spray. I chose the butter flavor nonstick spray. I thought that would add good flavor with the cinnamon, make it almost like buttery cinnamon roll. And then once the apple was fully chopped up, I put it in the air fryer basket on a foil, sprayed some of that nonstick spray, and added cinnamon and some Flavor God buttery cinnamon roll topper. I just tossed them around with my hands to coat them, added a little more of that topper, and then popped them in the air fryer. So in a bowl, I've got the non-fat plain Greek yogurt. I added some cinnamon, vanilla, no sugar added syrup, as well as just some regular cinnamon, and I just mix that together and add it to a piping bag so I can drizzle it on top of my apple fries. I've just been moving them around in the air fryer every few minutes, and then once they get a little bit crispy, I take them out. I drizzle them with the cinnamon Greek yogurt, top them with a little fat-free whipped cream, and then that is my apple fry dessert for 0 points on WeightWatchers. Next up, I'm making a breakfast bowl with a base of potatoes, and I'm kind of going for like a Chick-fil-A egg, chicken, and potato mix here. So first up, I'm cutting these potatoes up, spraying them with some nonstick spray, salt and pepper, and seasonings. And then I pop them in the air fryer for about 15 minutes, moving them around every 5 minutes or so. I'm going to be adding some scrambled eggs to this bowl, so I crack 3 of them into a dish and scramble them together. Then I've just got a pan heating up that I spray with some nonstick spray and start cooking the eggs. I've got a little bit of cheesy seasoning left over from Trader Joe's, so I sprinkle some of that on the eggs to give it a cheesy flavor. And then I had some blackened chicken just cooking in the air fryer as well with the potatoes. So once the potatoes are nice and crispy and the chicken is fully heated up, I just assemble the bowl with those things and the eggs. And then I drizzle some sriracha on top to give it a little bit more flavor and some heat. Now I'm making a quick chicken stir fry. So I actually already had some chicken marinating in the fridge. These are both in different garlic zesty seasoning packets with some water. And usually I like to let them marinate overnight, but I heated up my griddle and just started cooking the chicken as a big batch so I can also have it prepped later. And while the chicken is cooking, I added some stir-fry vegetables. It's actually from a big freezer bag that I had gotten from Costco, and it's got green beans, broccoli, carrots. So I just let that cook until it's no longer frozen. And to the vegetables, I add some garlic, salt, and onion powder, as well as a little soy sauce. And I always just try to get the less sodium soy sauce. Then I also added some sriracha to give it some heat and flavor. Once the chicken and vegetables are almost done cooking, I also add in some shrimp to the same pan as the veggies. And today I had raw shrimp, so I just make sure it's fully cooked. And then I just assemble the meal. I have a packet of riced hearts of palm that I strained, and I use that as my base. Then I'm adding the veggies with the shrimp and a good amount of chicken. And to the finished bowl, I add a little bit of sriracha. I love snack plates, and when I'm trying to keep them 0 points, I really try to prioritize packing them with some different filling foods. Today I'm using some tuna. I like to use chunk light and water. I mix in 2 to 3 tablespoons of plain non-fat Greek yogurt to get it to the consistency I want, and then some different garlic and herb seasonings. And as I was making this, I decided I wanted a little bit more tuna, so I also opened one of the tuna packets and strained that to mix in. Then I'm just cutting up some sweet peppers and scooping out the seeds to be able to stuff them so I can put them in the oven. I like to have some type of crunch when it comes to my snack plates, whether it's a cracker or a chip. So what I did is I used some of these Simply Potato shredded hash browns and I just made them into little piles. I sprayed them with some nonstick olive oil spray, topped them with some honey mustard seasoning and salt and pepper, and then I popped those in the oven with the stuffed peppers. I did have some leftover tuna, so I took some pickles out and kind of let them dry out for a second. Then I topped them with a little scoop of tuna. And then I always like to have something sweet, so I cleaned some grapes and put them in a bowl, and this was my complete plate once the stuffed peppers and potato crisps came out of the oven. Originally, I wanted to make waffle fries with these potatoes, but I couldn't find my crinkle cut tool to do that, so regular fries it is, and they turned out really good. I wanted the fries to taste like something from a restaurant. I know they weren't going to be deep fried, but the seasoning that I used, I have one from our local farmer's market that is so perfect for potato chips and fries. It's like an all-purpose seasoning, and that's what I used. To make it easier to season them all at once, I just lined them up together and then did one side, flipped them over, and then spaced them out because you want them spaced out when you're baking them in the oven. Then once they were flipped over, I added a little bit more salt and pepper and that seasoning that I mentioned, and then I popped them in the oven to bake. Doing this really helped to coat them in the seasoning. When I flipped them over halfway through baking, it really stuck on them, and that just gave them so much flavor. But while the fries were in the oven, I started to get the rest of the ingredients ready, so I chopped up the green onion and some pickles. I decided on a buffalo bowl, and I really like buffalo ranch, so I needed to make sure I had some type of buffalo ranch sauce. I just used some Greek yogurt and buffalo sauce mixed with onion salt and ranch seasoning from Trader Joe's. And then I just mixed it until it was combined and put it into an icing bag so I can drizzle it on top of my fries when they're done. I flipped them over halfway and then continued baking them. Then I also started up the ground chicken. Once the chicken was fully cooked, I just used my meat masher to make it into smaller pieces, and then I added some seasonings. I used a good amount of this Kinder's buffalo seasoning as well as some garlic salt and onion powder, and I just mixed it all together to combine it with the meat. I checked on the fries every 10 minutes or so and moved them around until they were fully done, which I want to say took about 30 minutes. Then once they were done, I divided them up evenly, so Adam and I each pretty much had our own potato. Then I divided up the cooked ground chicken, and we actually ended up splitting the package of 16 ounces, so we each had 8 ounces, which is more than we usually do, but I wanted to get more protein and make this more filling. And then I just topped the bowl with the chopped pickles, green onion, and drizzled it with the buffalo ranch sauce that I made using the Greek yogurt. Next up, I'm making some baked salmon with toasted chickpeas and a cucumber tomato salad. I just placed the salmon on a tray, and I get this from Sam's Club, so I make a big batch in bulk so I can have leftovers in the fridge. But I spray the salmon with some nonstick olive oil spray and add some salt and pepper and then whatever seasonings that I'll be using. And today I used a good amount of garlic and herb seasoning and some garlic salt. And I do each side, so I flip it over and spray it and add the seasoning again, and then I pop it in the oven to start baking. Next up, I start dicing the cucumbers, and first I need to mince some for the tzatziki I'll be making. It doesn't take that much, about 1 to 2 tablespoons, but I just put that in a separate bowl. And then I just chop up the rest of the cucumber for the cucumber salad I'll be making. I've got a pan on the stove that I start heating up, and then a can of garbanzo beans that I strained in the sink. I sprayed the pan with some nonstick olive oil spray, added the chickpeas, and then added a little bit of garlic parmesan seasoning and salt and pepper. Then while the salmon and chickpeas are finishing up cooking, I chop up grape tomatoes that I mix with the cucumbers, and then I make sure to check the salmon halfway and flip it over. Then to make the tzatziki, I have a tablespoon of fresh dill that I chop up. I also add some minced garlic. I add some garlic salt, and pepper, a little bit of lemon juice, and then about 3 tablespoons of plain non-fat Greek yogurt, and I just mix that until it's combined. I made sure to give it a quick taste with some cucumber to make sure that it was good, but then I also finish up making the cucumber salad. I've got some pickled red onions that I chop up and I mix those in. And then at that point, the chickpeas are done on the stove and the salmon is done baking in the oven, so I start to assemble my bowl. I lay down a good amount of the cucumber tomato onion mix. I add the chickpeas, salmon, and then a good amount of that tzatziki sauce drizzled on top. And I truly love this tzatziki. It has such good flavor. I need to start prepping some in advance to just have, because it's really similar to the one I get from Aldi, but just tastes even more fresh. I wanted to get the oats started right away because I figured they would bake for a little bit. So to them, I added some cinnamon, vanilla, a little butter spray, and then I just mixed that together. I also added a splash of this vanilla sugar-free Torani syrup. Usually when I make oats like this or a crumble topping, I like to add a little bit of brown sugar. So the sugar-free syrup was just a replacement for that and really added some good sweetness. Then I needed to get the apples started, so I've got a pan that I'm just chopping them up and adding them to. I add about 2 tablespoons of water to the apples while they're cooking, and this just helps make them nice and juicy, and when I add some cinnamon and stuff, it kind of solidifies into more of a sauce. Sometimes I'll add cornstarch to thicken up the sauce. I probably could have done that. I think the amount I would have needed is 0 points, but I didn't do that this time, and it still worked out really well. And while the apples are cooking, I do keep them covered. Then once they've been cooking for a little bit, I add some vanilla, a little bit of that sugar-free syrup, and some cinnamon, and I just continue to let them cook. I take the oats out of the oven after they're nice and crispy, usually about 15 minutes or so, and then the apples are also done at the same time, so I put those in a bowl with the yogurt. And then I add the oat topping to finish the yogurt bowl off. I also add a little bit of Flavor God buttery cinnamon roll topper. A sweet potato taco bowl is a nice filling option that's easy to pack with a lot of different 0 point foods. I'm starting by dicing up my sweet potatoes here, and I'm not using all of these for this dish, but it's nice to just prep some ahead that I can have ready in the fridge, so that's why I've got a couple sweet potatoes, but I spray them with some nonstick olive oil spray and top them with some different garlic seasonings. I make sure the diced sweet potato is nice and coated, and then I pop it in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit to roast, usually checking it every 5 minutes or so and just moving them around. I'm making a quick taco sauce using some plain non-fat Greek yogurt, some Taco Bell mild sauce, garlic powder, onion salt, and cumin. Non-fat Greek yogurt can work as a great substitute for sour cream, but whenever I use it on taco bowls, I do like to add some seasoning or sauce like this. And I did already have some ingredients prepped, so I had some veggie mix made and some lean ground chicken made into taco meat. I also opened a can of black beans. Specifically, these are seasoned black beans from Walmart, but once my potatoes are done in the oven, I lay them down as the base in my bowl. I've got some veggie mix that I already had prepped, which is pepper, onion, and zucchini. I add a good portion of that ground taco meat that I just heated up in the microwave, and then I had some fresh salsa, which is 0 points, and then I drizzle the sauce on top. And it looks all pretty completed like this, but I do like to mix it all together to get everything coated with the sauce, and then you get a little bite of everything. I got this hard-boiled egg maker off of Amazon a while back, and I just love using it so much. It's quick and easy, and they always come out perfectly. So once I got those started, I started working on the pancake where I just mashed up a banana. I wasn't following any specific recipe, but these actually turned out really good and the perfect texture. So I mash up the banana and then I add some sweetener. I also mixed in some sweetener and then egg whites, which I actually ended up adding more after I mixed the oats in because I wanted it to be a little bit more of a runny consistency. But using my handheld blender, I just mixed together the oats until they were pretty much blended. I also added a little bit of baking powder and mixed this together to form the pancake batter, all while my griddle has been heating up. Then, like I said, I did add a little bit more egg white, which did help add some extra protein as well, and then I just divided it into 3 equal pancakes. Those only took a few minutes to cook on each side, and then I just put them on a plate and realized I needed something to drizzle on top of the pancakes. I decided I could add a little extra protein if I made a sweetened up Greek yogurt on top, so I made a sauce to drizzle on top using just a little bit of powdered peanut butter, the same sweetener from before, and then non-fat plain Greek yogurt. I drizzled that on top, and then I also added some fresh blueberries, which added some juiciness to this as well and worked perfectly with the yogurt. I peeled and cut in half 2 of the hard-boiled eggs, added a little salt and pepper, and that was my complete breakfast, all for 0 points. Next up, I'm making some meatballs and spaghetti using hearts of palm pasta. I end up getting 3 servings out of these meatballs, but I've got a pound of lean ground beef and I add in egg, some garlic salt, and some different garlic parmesan seasonings. I mix it all together using my hands, and then I like to use my food scale to weigh out equal portions for each meatball. Then once they're all portioned out, I just use my hands to form them into more neat balls that I'm going to be cooking on the stove. So I've got a pan heating up on a low-medium heat. I add some nonstick spray to the pan, and then I add each meatball and cover it to start letting them cook. And I do make sure to continue moving them around every couple minutes or so and flipping them over until they get nice and browned like this. And once they're fully cooked, I add in some tomato sauce. So I've got a can of regular tomato sauce from Trader Joe's and then a can of diced tomatoes that I strained. I season the sauce with some onion powder, garlic salt, Italian seasoning, and a little bit of that garlic parmesan seasoning that I used earlier, and I just mix that all around until it's combined and cover it to cook. Once it's been cooking for a few minutes, I take the meatballs out with some of the sauce, and then the sauce I'll be using for our portions today, I add in some cottage cheese. I let that get nice and melty, and then I add 2 packets of hearts of palm pasta. So I just strained this out, and I get these packs from Aldi. And I just break apart the hearts of palm. It's a little bit easier to use tongs like this. I get it fully coated in the sauce, and then I divide it into 2 equal portions, topped with some of those meatballs as well. For lunch, I knew I wanted to use up some of the ground taco meat that I had made in the fridge. I also have some roasted corn that I popped in the microwave just to heat it up so it wasn't frozen, and I get the roasted corn from Trader Joe's in the freezer section. I've got my oven preheating to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I'm just prepping the sweet peppers that I'll be stuffing with the meat and corn mixture. I find it's easiest to just use a knife to cut each corner and then try to scoop out the seeds. And I ended up cutting 7 peppers. I probably could have done more, but it worked out well that I had extra mixture I just put on top, but you'll see that in a second. So once I got the peppers prepared, I've got the bowl of corn that I heated up in the microwave, again, just so that it wasn't frozen anymore. Then I've got this ground taco meat. I made it earlier in the week using lean ground chicken and taco seasoning, and I really wanted to add a good amount of that so I could add some protein and make this meal nice and filling. I wanted to add a little bit of cheesiness, so it worked out that I could add some fat-free cottage cheese and just mix that into the corn and meat. So I've got my glass baking dish here, which is 8 by 6 by 2, and I just spray it with some nonstick olive oil spray. Then you can see I just take the meat mixture and stuff it into each pepper, pressing it down firmly so I can get as much in there as possible. I really thought I was going to be able to fit all of this into the peppers, but that was not the case. So after I finished stuffing each pepper and laying them into the glass baking dish, there was some extra meat and corn mixture that I just ended up pouring over the peppers. It was all going into the oven to bake anyway, and I figured that I would be eating this with a fork, so why not just add all of it in? I also topped it with a little bit of taco sauce, so my favorite to use is the Taco Bell mild sauce, and I just get the bottle like this, usually from Walmart. I also sprayed the top of the bake with a little more of that nonstick olive oil spray, sprinkled on some garlic salt, and then popped it in the oven to bake for about 25 minutes or so until the peppers got nice and soft. Eggs are a great option for a 0-point breakfast, but I like to add different things, whether it's vegetables or potatoes, to bulk up the meals and help me get more nutrients. For this quick breakfast today, I start with 2/3 cup of diced potatoes that I sprayed with some nonstick olive oil spray and added some seasonings. And it's nice because you can always mix up the seasonings and flavors you use. I diced up some sweet pepper and also added that to the foil that I popped in the air fryer to roast both the potatoes and pepper. And then I got started with the scrambled eggs. So I've got 3 eggs and a little bit of cottage cheese that I mixed together until it's nice and combined. Then I've got a pan at high heat. I sprayed with some nonstick spray and I add the eggs and I continue cooking them and adding some salt and pepper. Then those are done right at the same time as my potatoes and sweet peppers, so I mix the pepper into the eggs and then I just add the potato to the bowl. I just ripped apart some turkey lunch meat with my hands and I wanted to heat it up for a minute or two, so I mixed that with the eggs and pepper and then I just added that to my bowl with the potatoes. My favorite hot sauces to add to eggs are definitely Cholula and Sriracha, but today I was craving Sriracha specifically, so I drizzled a good amount of that on my eggs, and then I did end up mixing this all together, but it was a nice filling meal, and the potatoes were perfectly crisp. I made sure to wash the sweet potatoes, and I like to leave the skin on, but you could definitely peel them for this. I almost wanted this to work as if it was like little slices of bread or crackers, so I did want them to be a little bit more on the thin side. And the thickness I did turned out to be perfect. It was still a little bit soft in the center, but it had a nice crispy edge to each of them. But we're each going to have our own potatoes, so I'm cutting up 2 of them today, and then I spray them with some nonstick olive oil spray and add the buttery garlic seasoning. I also added some onion salt, and then I just flipped each one over and sprayed it again with some of that nonstick spray and did another layer of seasoning. My oven's been preheating to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, so I pop the potato slices in the oven and then get started on the chicken salad. The red onion I had was kind of small, so I just chopped up the whole thing and added it to the bowl, as well as a red bell pepper. Then the shredded chicken breast that I got had some pretty big chunks in it, so I added it to the bowl with the pepper and onion, and then I put on some gloves so I could just easily separate it into smaller pieces. This chicken didn't have any seasoning already added to it, so I wanted to add some flavor with the mustard. I added pepper, also some garlic salt, onion salt, and then I have a ranch seasoning from Trader Joe's. I added a good amount of that. I don't really measure out the Greek yogurt, but I added a good amount, and you can see the chicken just sucks it up, so I did have to add a little bit more. But I just keep mixing it and adding the Greek yogurt until it's the consistency I prefer. I put the chicken salad on the potatoes while they were still hot, and it kind of warmed up the chicken salad, which I really liked. And I wanted to make sure I got a lot of protein, so I did use a good amount of chicken salad on the potatoes. But the combination of the sweet potatoes with the chicken salad was perfect, especially having grapes on the side. I also just love the combination of grapes with chicken salad. And this kept me full for a long time. It was definitely a filling and really tasty meal, especially for 0 points. Next up is a yogurt bowl, very similar to the one I make every night for my dessert, but this one is using only 0 point foods. So I've got a half cup of old-fashioned oats that I mix with some cinnamon and vanilla. Usually I add some type of cereal or granola to my yogurt bowls, so this will be the perfect topping. I just pop it in the oven at 350 and let it cook for 5 to 10 minutes, moving it around every few minutes. I mix 3/4 cup of plain non-fat Greek yogurt with some cinnamon and vanilla. And then I also added some no sugar added sweetener, and it gets a little bit liquidy, but this happens anyway when I mix it with my mixed berries. So I took 1 cup of frozen mixed berries and popped it in the microwave for about a minute and a half. I honestly prefer when they get a little bit warm. Then I top them with the Greek yogurt that I mixed with cinnamon and vanilla, and then also the toasted oats when they're done in the oven. For dinner tonight, I was planning on doing mashed potatoes with burgers, kind of similar to the KFC bowl, but I just wanted to make a base of mashed potatoes, have some grilled mushrooms and onions, and then burger patties that I chopped up with pickles, and that was just really what I was craving for dinner. I like to cook the onions and mushrooms on just a medium-low heat for pretty much the entire time. I find that it just brings out the most flavor that way and gets them perfectly sautéed. To cook the potatoes, I just put them in a big pot of water, and then you bring that pot to a boil and let them continue to cook until they are soft. I usually just use a fork to test them. And while those were cooking, I got the burger meat ready. So this is 0 points on WeightWatchers. It's just from Costco, and I decided to make a bigger batch of it so I could have some leftovers. I just mix the ground beef with my hands. I add some seasoning to it, and then I use my food scale to weigh out equal burger portions. I really love my griddle to cook burgers like this, so I just spray it with some non-stick butter spray, and then I flatten them out and let them cook evenly on each side. And it really doesn't take too long to make these, so while I was cooking these, the potatoes also finished up, and I just strained them in the sink. I use my KitchenAid mixer to get them perfectly mashed. I feel like it helps to just whip them up a little bit too, especially when I'm not adding a bunch of like butter or cream or anything. But I added the chicken bone broth, and then I didn't measure it out, but I added a nice scoop of plain non-fat Greek yogurt, and then the different seasonings that I wanted to add. So I put a good amount of onion salt, some of that garlic butter seasoning from Kinder's, and then some salt and pepper. And I just kept that going in the KitchenAid mixer until it was nice and smooth. I prefer my mashed potatoes with some chunks in it, and honestly I like the skin on the potatoes, so you could peel them if you'd like, but I like to just leave it on. I also really wanted some tomatoes in this bowl, so I just had these grape tomatoes that I sliced in half. And then it was time to assemble the bowls, so I just divided the potatoes. I actually got an extra leftover serving out of this batch, and then enough for me and Adam to each make a bowl. Of course, I wanted to add some pickles, and Grillos are my favorite, so I chopped up a good amount of those pickle chips, and then I've got 2 burger patties that I also diced up. Usually I would add some type of cheese, but honestly when I ate this, it really didn't need it. The creaminess of the potatoes was perfect, especially with a little drizzle of this mustard. It added the perfect amount of flavor. Egg scrambles with shredded hash browns are always a go-to meal of mine because they're really quick and easy to throw together and it's all in just one pan. I spray a pan with some nonstick spray and I add in 100 grams of shredded hash browns. And I just continue to stir those around while I get everything ready. So I chopped up some spinach and sweet peppers. I added salt and pepper to the potatoes as they cook, and then I'm also adding lunch meat to this scramble today. So I've got some Crocus ham and turkey lunch meat for 0 points. Once the potatoes start to look a little more toasted, I add in the spinach, peppers, and I also added a little bit of diced onion. Then I add some onion powder and garlic salt, and after a few more minutes, I mix in the lunch meat. On top of the potato lunch meat mix, I crack 3 eggs and I quickly scramble them to make sure the hash browns get nice and coated, and I have it at a high heat, so I just move it around pretty frequently. And once the eggs are fully cooked, it is done. I put it in a bowl and top it with a little bit of sriracha. This next recipe could be a breakfast or a dessert. I'm making some oats with berries and a chocolate yogurt on top. So I start with a half cup of quick oats that I mix with water, cinnamon, and a little sugar-free sweetener, and I just cook it in the microwave. In another bowl, I added a cup of frozen mixed berries that I also popped in the microwave to heat up. And then I quickly make the chocolate yogurt that's going to go on top. I've got about a half cup of plain non-fat Greek yogurt that I mixed with some cocoa powder. And the one I used is specifically a dark cocoa powder. I also added some vanilla sweetener to that. And then I assembled it by adding the berries on top of the oatmeal, the yogurt on top of that, and then of course a little bit of fat-free whipped cream. I debated just making 2 servings out of this soup and using the entire cans, but I ended up using the extras for taco pasta, which worked out even better. It's nice that chicken tortilla soup can be an easy soup that I can just throw together as a single serving, or I can make a large batch of it if I want. And the deciding factor was that I actually didn't have enough chicken to make 2 servings. So for this single serving, I'm opening the can of diced tomatoes, the corn, and black beans, and I'm just going to use half or even less of the can in the pot. I feel like whenever I make chicken tortilla soup, I just kind of measure as I go and don't really follow a specific recipe. You can really mix it up, the different vegetables you use. Sometimes I even like to throw zucchini in there. But I add in the chicken stock and I just let that continue to cook until it starts boiling a little bit. I season the soup with some onion powder, garlic salt, cumin, and then a little of this Kinder's garlic butter seasoning. I let that continue to simmer for about 5 to 7 minutes and then I start cutting up the cooked chicken breast that I have. I just let that cook for a few more minutes while I get the cottage cheese blended, which was a little bit of a struggle just because I didn't put enough in there, so I had to keep shaking it, but it did end up working. And then I just used one of my big ramen soup bowls for this. It was a nice large portion, and I topped it with the blended cottage cheese. I specifically got sweet potatoes for this dinner tonight because I've been wanting to try to make some sweet potato waffle fries with this new cutter that I got. Unfortunately, it was a lot harder to cut them than the regular potatoes, which you'll see in a second. I started using some yellow potatoes as well because I had some extras on hand and they slice so much easier. So I did put this glove on just to be extra safe. And I've just got a bowl of ice water that I soak the potatoes in for at least 30 minutes. And this just helps to get some of the starches out to allow the potatoes to get more crispy when you bake them. So I made sure to get those soaking a little bit earlier than when I wanted to start dinner. And then after they were done, I laid out a towel like this and laid out each fry so they could get nice and dry. So at this point, I preheat the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit and I let the potatoes sit out for a few minutes while I get the onions chopped that I'm going to be grilling on the stove just to use on my burgers. I place them in a pan on the stove to start cooking and I cover them so they get nice and soft. Then on a sheet with some parchment paper and nonstick spray, I lay out the waffle cut fries and I spray them with some nonstick butter spray as well as some salt. And then I have a seasoned salt that I really like from my local farmer's market, so I put a good amount of that on these fries. I just do a layer on each and then flip them over, spray them again, and add some more seasoning and salt. And then I repeat the exact same steps with the yellow potatoes that I cut. I just put them on 2 separate trays today in case they baked at different times. but they actually did end up finishing around the same time. So I sprayed them, added the seasoning, flipped them over, a little more spray and seasoning, and then I popped them in the oven at 400 to bake. Next up, I'm making the burger patties that I'll just be cooking on my griddle. So I've got some lean ground beef, an egg, and then some different burger seasonings, some onion salt. I just use my hands to combine the meat with the seasonings. And then I use my food scale to weigh out equal portions for the burgers. And I find it easier to weigh out all the portions first and then form them into the shape of a ball. Today with these patties, I want to make them more like a smash patty. So I will be using my burger press, and what I do is I just wrap some foil around it and then I spray it with some nonstick spray before I press it onto the ground beef patties. That way it doesn't stick as much, although you'll see I kind of do have to peel the patties off of it. So here I've got my griddle heated up and I'm forming the meat into balls first. I want to make sure they're all formed into a ball before I start cooking them because they do cook pretty quickly. Then you can see I put them on the griddle and use my press to flatten them out as much as I can. It definitely does help to spray the burger press with some nonstick spray just so that it comes off a little bit easier. But I just press the burgers down and let them cook on each side for a few minutes. And I did this in 2 batches because I ended up making about 10 burger patties. Then about halfway through baking them, I pulled the waffle fries out and I just used a fork to flip them all over. I do end up baking these pretty long because I try to get them nice and crispy, so this was about 15 minutes in. And the overall bake time ends up being about 25 to 30 minutes total. Then I decided to make a quick sauce for the fries. So I've got some non-fat plain Greek yogurt, a little sriracha, some garlic powder, no sugar added barbecue sauce, and I just like the Sweet Baby Ray's brand. And I just mix it all together until it forms a sauce. Then I'm on to the second batch of burger patties. Again, kind of struggling to get it off of the burger press, but I was happy with how flat I was able to get them this time. It's definitely harder to get them more flat and crispy when they are more of a lean meat, but I like to use this because it is 0 points. I laid out some romaine lettuce for the burger patties, and then I topped them with my onions as well as some spicy mustard. I loved the combination of this mustard with the onions and the burgers. And I always joke that I can't have a burger without a bun, but honestly, the romaine worked really well because there was so much flavor with the onions and the mustard and the patties that I really didn't mind it. But I was able to have a good serving of the waffle fries. I had some of the sweet potato and yellow potato fries. And then, of course, I had to add some gherkin pickles to have on the side with my burger and fries. These oat bakes are really simple to put together, but they do take a little bit to bake, so I always make sure to preheat my oven first before I start making them. I start by mashing a banana, adding a container of no sugar added applesauce, 1 egg. Today I added a tablespoon of PB2. I didn't realize it was 0 points, so I decided to try that. And then 2 tablespoons of non-fat plain Greek yogurt. I mix it all together until it's combined, and then I'm adding some of this Tortilla S'mores no sugar added syrup, as well as some of this Girl Scout S'mores seasoning. Once that's combined, I add some baking powder, a half cup of oats, some cinnamon, and I mix it all together before pouring it into a baking dish. This is my favorite IKEA glass baking dish. It's 8x6x2, and I just sprayed it with some nonstick spray. I top it with a little more of that s'more seasoning, and then I pop it in the oven to bake. Then I wanted to make the Greek yogurt drizzle. I just added some vanilla, a little bit of the cinnamon vanilla Torani sugar-free syrup, some cinnamon and Greek yogurt, and mix that together. And then I just drizzle it on top of the bake and enjoy. I did end up pouring some of the water out, but it seemed like the Greek yogurt was still pretty mixed in with the oats that I had put in the night before. And unless I'm making a big potato scramble egg thing for breakfast, I like to just make the vegetables and cook them first, and then I put them aside and cook the eggs separately. I find that then the eggs just get so much fluffier. So the spinach and mushrooms only took a few minutes to cook on the stove, and then I just put them aside on the plate that I'm going to be putting my eggs on later, and then I wipe out the pan, cook the eggs in it, and then I add the veggies back in. And to make the steel-cut oats on the stove, you definitely have to stir them pretty frequently because they will start to stick to the bottom. I've had some people say that they make large batches of their steel-cut oats in a crock pot, or even I want to say like an Instant Pot. So I think I might try that next time, but it really isn't too difficult to make them on the stove. Like I said, you just have to make sure you stir them a lot. I usually really like the brand Skinny Syrups, but lately I've been using this Torani syrup and I actually like it even more. I found that the flavor isn't as much of like an artificial sugar taste, but either way, those are both good options. I topped the eggs with a drizzle of sriracha and realized I forgot the turkey, so I added that on as well, and then that was my breakfast for 0 points. For my dessert tonight, I'm going to be using another one of those IKEA glass baking dishes to make a little bit of like a berry apple crumble. I start with a half cup of old-fashioned oats, and I'm mixing in some blueberry applesauce, some cinnamon, and then some of that no sugar added sweetener that is the Torani brand. And I just used French vanilla sweetener for that. Then I've got a Cosmic Crisp apple here that I'm just chopping up, and I prefer to just leave the skin on, but you could definitely peel it. But I just dice it into smaller pieces and add it to that glass baking dish with a good amount of these mixed berries that I get from Sam's Club. They're just in the freezer section. I added a good amount of cinnamon to the fruit as well as some of this cinnamon vanilla sweetener, and then I just used my hand to mix it all together and get everything coated. On top of that, I just add the oat mixture with the applesauce and spread it out to make a crumble topping. And then I pop this in the oven to bake for about 30 minutes, rotating halfway. I drizzled a little bit of no sugar added chocolate sauce, which I hadn't tried before, but it actually went really well with this. But this was such a great portion and definitely satisfied my sweet tooth.